Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another special episode of Spirituality. I am joined by my dear friend, Mandy Capehart, who means so much to me and the work that she does, and also just the conversations that we've been able to have on her podcast, which I highly recommend that you go check out. It's called Restorative Grief. Again, I am so thrilled to have you, Mandy. Thank you for spending some time with me.
Oh, you're welcome, Derek. It's so good to see you.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Mandy, I don't want to steal your thunder because I would love for you, in your own words, to be able to talk about some of the work that you get to do. But walk some people through what is going on in your life, what brings you passion, and what is your mission that you see, and how you're navigating spaces both online and offline in the world.
Yeah, just small questions, right? No problem.
Yeah, no big deal. Totally lighthearted.
My mission in life is to normalize grief and have conversations about it that don't completely take us off kilter and send us on a spiral. So, for the last 30 years, I was a part of evangelical Christianity in one way or another, including nearly 20 years as a worship leader. And
Gotta-
the stories I could tell. What ended up transitioning in my life was death through a lot of
Mm,
different relationships, family members leaving, divorcing, so many different levels of loss. And ultimately in 2015, my grandfather died. He was integral in helping us and raising us. And then my mom died in 2016. It was on the heels of years of infertility and trying to get pregnant, on amongst other things. So I ended up realizing this is a chaotic existence. I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know up from down. My faith community does not know what to do with me whatsoever. In 2018, I ended up attending worship university up at Bethel in Reading. And it was an incredible experience in that my background is in anthropology as well. And so I was very absorbed in the people watching and the culture of it all. And at the end of the weeks I was there, I realized this is not me anymore. This is not me. This part of it was really never me. I have tried to fit in here and tried to make sense of my
mm,
life here, and it's not making sense. What served me the best there was living alone for 2 weeks and experiencing what life was like just with me, because I'd never
mm,
done that before. That was fascinating. That's another story. What ended up happening, I came home, I stepped down and decided to pour myself into what grief work looks like in the context of a faith practice and a community that does not know what to do with me and has no idea what supporting grievers looks like from a healthy spirituality approach. I was used to spiritual bypassing and so many offerings for prayer and laying on of hands and
mm.
unending platitudes of scriptures and book referrals and flat out, what do you mean you're still grieving comments? And can you come serve? I don't understand why you're down. So it was really disheartening because I'm not a quiet person. I'm an Enneagram 8. I pick fights over glasses and mugs going missing in office spaces. Like, I will fight for justice. Where that has pushed my whole little life is into this direction of restorative grief, because I wrote a book. I was realizing I am a part of a community that doesn't know up from down. And I've watched people grieving in the same community and just floundering and honestly
Mm.
disappearing from the community, pulling away and not going noticed as they pulled away because no one knew how to hold space for them. So this book I wrote is called Restorative Grief as well, because that makes it easy. It's 31 days of guiding people through the stages of grief because it's familiar, but also dismantling the linear myth about them. But it's
Mm.
all from this position of what my faith turned into and how it showed up for me through the process. So every day it's structured like a devotional so that the church crowd will appreciate it because it's what we know. But what I love about it is so much of it is like, hey, chew the meat, spit out the bones. Do you find something that's offensive? Cross it out. This is your book. I don't need it back. I don't need to know what it serves. I need to know, does it serve in some capacity? Did you get one thing out of it? Fantastic. Do you hate this? Now another place of grief work that does not resonate with you. Stay away from faith-based resources, right? So creating this and being able to help people go through where they're headed next in their grief work has become this incredible and very honestly exciting and wonderful experience for my life too. So did I answer your
Yeah.
questions? I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So much I want to touch on.
Sure.
I think what first comes to mind, I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy, but you mentioned something that happened during that time when you went to the worship school. and something began to change. What was it, if you could unpack that some more? Because I'm sure you're not the only person, and I'm sure that you've had other people come to you with similar experiences. But what were some of those things that were starting to come up? Was it questions? Was it, what did it look like in particular? I know you mentioned even some of not feeling like you were fitting in.
Yeah. Worship music as an industry, and it is an industry, is
Mm,
incredibly, what's a good word to say? It's incredibly compact. There aren't a lot of inroads. There are a lot of really good formulas.
yep.
As a writer, I've been a musician and a singer and a writer my whole life. I am not good at song lyrics. I think I am, but then it turns out I'm not. And the reason I think I am is I will sit with a piece. It is incredibly heartfelt. And I married a musician. He was also a worship leader for a very long time. The man puts poetry to music. You cannot understand what he's talking about, but it's so beautiful. I'm somewhere in between, right? Not very practical. Like I'm not a Matt Redman or a Chris Tomlin author, nothing that clear, but in between the two, right? The words I would write would get such feedback and such criticism of this doesn't make any sense, or this is really cryptic, or no one can sing along with this, or what are you doing? Among other things. So I would sit back and I know I'm a good writer. Why can't I do that? Why am I bad at this part of it? Okay. The feedback I would get vocally, I'm a great vocalist, but it was, "Well, you're not quite there yet. You don't the way you should." I've been singing since I was 5, 6, 7, all through. So the feedback and the impression I got was I don't fit. What I can look back on now and recognize, oh, I was trying to fit in and I hated it because I am not someone who needs to fit in. I need to find belonging within myself and then create belonging around me so that I have a community with people like you who see who I am and appreciate who I am instead of saying, oh, that's not quite right. There's something off about this or off about you. Not to say I can't take or receive criticism or correction by any means, but when you take this incredibly vulnerable, I used to say worship leaders are willing to bleed on stage for you because it
Mm,
takes every bit of our vulnerability, in theory, to lead with a heart that is open to whatever spirit has to say, that is available, that can manage their own emotional state with it. I remember once crying, not even like offensively or loudly, just and being criticized afterwards, saying that was really inappropriate. You need
mm,
to maintain, you need to maintain your emotionality on stage, you're leading. Far be it for me to have emotions.
yeah.
Mm, At Worship You, they did what they do really well. They did. There were a few key moments. There was one person I really felt drawn to as a leader, and I have been listening to their music for a long time. And I got an opportunity to say hello, and they did the awkward stage run. Oh my God, so nice to meet you. Yeah, great. Have a wonderful day. Okay, cool. Just pulling away instead of
Uh,
just being, and I was like, oh, that was weird. Okay, that was weird. There were a couple of other moments and I just felt, oh, okay, there's a lot of people here. Not going to sit and say like, why can't I be special? Because that's not it. But that was insincere and authentic. I don't know. And maybe I'm reading into it. Point is, by the end of it, I felt very, okay, I can continue to perform. I can perform. I could get a deal. I could start writing like that, but it doesn't feel honest. And I don't know
yeah.
where to go with that. So it was and when I got home and talked with people and expressed how I felt, there was no negativity. There was no criticism. There was like, okay, I'm glad you found something that we're glad you got out of it, what you got out of it. That's really important for you. Take your time. Because I stepped down not long after coming home from that. And it was really interesting because I faded away from the community in general. Like it was a long time coming that I stepped down, but to feel like I now no longer exist was wild. Because again, it was
Mm,
that sense of do I just fit in or am I
right.
just trying to fit in or do I fulfill a need, which is really, I think, a lot clearer. I filled a need and then I didn't. And then I wasn't as valuable anymore, which, hey, you leave a job, they don't call you anymore. That's fine. But it was supposed to be family, right? It was supposed to be
Right.
community and friendship and depth. And it clearly wasn't.
Yeah. I think you touched on something really important, namely that when you're in a space where you're led to believe that it's like family, there should be a certain sense of safety
Yeah.
and space for you to explore who you are and to express yourself in an authentic manner. And for you, like in your experience being in Reading, being around really notable people within the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and having that disconnect, I think probably was a big eye-opening experience like you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And I can share that I've gone through similar experiences too. I was trying to make a little ripple within that worship world as well. And I saw a little bit behind the scenes of how much of a machine it is.
It is, yeah.
And that for something like worship in particular, as being a vehicle of connecting with
Mm-hmm.
God, it's meant honestly, it's something that even through deconstruction I've missed so much. And I feel like in some ways has there's not quite a replacement for it. But I say all that because my favorite kind of worship, no matter where I was at along my journey of taking apart toxic theology,
Mm-hmm.
it was always about what is going to foster a real, genuine moment of expression where I feel like I can be, like I can take my mask off. I don't feel like I have to perform,
Yeah.
not just from the stage, but also just from engaging in that with that music as a vehicle
Yeah.
for spirituality. The songs, the music, the environments that felt most conducive to connection were the ones that were raw and honest and not showy. And I think for me, leaving some of those spaces again, I think you recognize how there is a pressure, not just, and again, leaving even the worship conversation, how there is a pressure to conform, to look the part. I remember personally being a part of a mega church that was a plant from Australia, a part of a notable network that most of you could probably guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, again, feeling like I didn't fit in, but trying really hard to fit in.
Yeah.
And there was one Sunday morning, I'll never forget, got up at the crack of dawn to be there early for rehearsal and all that jazz. And we're rehearsing. I'm from California and I'm used to leading worship in flip flops or barefoot. That's my jam. That is my thing. Just felt like I was connected to the earth, or there was just something simple about it. I don't know. It just felt honest,
Mm-hmm.
like we were talking about before. And I'll never forget the pastor's wife pulled the worship pastor aside, who then pulled me aside and said, "Hey, we're getting ready to be TV ready, and you can't be wearing sandals." My wife, who our son at the time was less than a year old, I think, had to come before 7 a.m. and bring me boots so that I could look the part. And I think that was definitely one of those rocks in the shoe that began
Mm-hmm.
to expose the discomfort and disconnect. That is that what this is about? And I think that was, again, one of the pieces of the puzzle that inevitably gave way.
Yeah.
And to me, and even this podcast, my hope is that us, you listener, whoever's watching this, whoever's participating, even in a conversation, and myself included, that we're at the center of our spirituality, not from like a selfish kind of typical. I feel like evangelicalism really harped on like the self being evil, right? It was taboo to think about putting ourselves first, but in a really real way, reclaiming who we are and reclaiming our experience, reclaiming our identity is such an integral and honest part of spirituality. And that, if in my experience, the more I stepped into becoming intimately aware with who I am on the deepest level, the more I recognized that the line between spirit and me was very infinitesimally small, like so small to where I see the divine within everything and everything wrapped in divinity.
Yeah.
And so I don't mean to ramble on this, but it makes me think again, how the contrast between operating in a system that pushes these cookie cutter caricatures to put on a show, to
Mhm.
have the act and not show too much emotion, because that's gonna rock the boat.
Distract, yeah.
Right. And or is it about having an honest lived human experience and becoming more of who you are?
Yeah.
That is the most quote unquote godly thing that you could do. The most spiritual thing that you could do is to know yourself and to love yourself and to step into a more authentic expression of being.
Yeah.
And anyway, I don't mean to go off too far down that tangent,
You're
but
good. You're
yeah.
good. There's one thing that I will always appreciate about the last church we were a part of was the emphasis on love your neighbors as you love yourself. And what does it mean to love yourself? There was a
Mm,
wonderful emphasis on that. Whether that was then taught in a way that I loved or participated in, whatever, the emphasis of, hey, you actually need to value who you are. And I had 2 other podcast conversations and 2 clients today, and every one of them at some point brought up, what does it mean to love yourself? What does it mean to take care
mm,
of who you are? What does it mean to believe that you are worthy of paying attention to you and taking care
yeah.
of your needs and strategies to support yourself before you pour yourself out onto the pavement for everyone else? And one client was so beautiful and honest to say, I never knew that was okay.
Mm,
To recognize in me in that moment, I remember feeling like it was not okay to take care of myself, to say,
yeah.
"Oh, no, I can't do that. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to volunteer. I cannot. Thank you for letting me have the option." In a space where family is the word used, we tend to be a little more easily persuaded
Yep.
to say yes when we don't mean it. It is not that someone's attempting to manipulate us, they're trying to. It's that the model of family they are creating is a service-oriented, yes, yes, yes type of situation. So when you get to that point where all you need is space to heal, to recognize that there is nothing secular, it is all sacred, to go back away from more of that Western Christianity understanding of
Mhm.
spirituality and, God forbid, decolonize our spirituality to figure out like,
Right.
we have made this about us in the most traumatic way.
Right.
That is a really hard thing to get a Western church to do because they're going on television in 3 minutes. They have money to bring in. It is a business. It
It
is,
is.
it's a business with maybe the best foundation. We want people to have wholeness. We want people to connect. We want community, whatever. I was even just thinking today about how we need community. We need
Mhm.
to spend evenings together in the fields, watching each other's children and feeding whoever walks up to us and getting to know each other and attuning to one another and having relationship. Gosh, at its best, that's church community.
Right.
At its best, that is people showing up and genuinely getting to know one another. But when that is a programmed once a quarter event, and the rest of the time we're sitting and listening to someone and then going our separate ways and wondering, do we even matter? Because no one talks to us. The turn and greet someone feels formulaic as well. That's where we get off track. That's where we start to feel that sense of our spirit within wither. And that
Mhm.
idea of grieving as a holistic person. Now, that's part of the restorative grief model that I developed is that integrative heart, mind, body, spirit. You cannot heal if part of you is in disarray. So when you are grieving, anything that felt aligned, off to the sidelines. Being able to draw those pieces of yourself back in requires you to recognize that they're all connected. They're all part and parcel of who you are, and who you are is valuable, and who you are is worthy of time on a sabbatical to step down and be like, no, thank you. It's not just leadership that needs time away from pouring themselves into community. And this is beyond just spiritual communities too, but being able to give yourself permission not to conform, but to flourish in who you are and to figure out for yourself what it is that you want to shift in your identity or really in your personality and moving that personality to the side so that true self can come to the surface.
Mhm.
When I was a part of, when I was really involved in church, it was so heavy because my personality was constantly criticized. And when I say
Yeah.
constantly criticized. And it's one thing to stand back and be like, personality is a shield. Personality is not me. That's the way I interact with people in the world. And it's just often playful or irreverent. But when someone sees you as your personality and cannot get past it to that true self, cannot recognize, wow, you're a whole person that's worthy of divine intervention, let alone my attention, then I'm going to wither too. I'm going to say, God, if they tell me to stop swearing one more time, because that's the reason the world hasn't found Christ, like that's ridiculous. But that's the
Yeah.
emphasis that's placed on it, right? Oh, if that worship song that you wrote has one too many counts or you can't get the beat right, if you mess up that harmony one more time, it's lost the plot, right? But
Hmm.
again, it goes back to, yeah, we would want people to be able to focus. We don't want them staring at Derek's toes. What if that's a stumbling block? And we've got bigger concerns. Then we've got bigger issues. Then we're actually not here for the right purpose. What's the purpose? To know and be known, to see and be seen, to love and be loved. If we have strayed from that, then we're either just trying to make money or get power or
Yeah.
preserve the money or the power that we have. And that's reductionist, but it's also been really clear in a lot of my experiences. That's what's prioritized.
Yeah. No, and I don't think it's reductionist at all. I think it's a very valid critique of the systemic issues
Mm.
within organized Christianity, in particular in the US, and namely evangelicalism.
Mhm.
And the issue is when you have the rise of Christian nationalism and how there's this um the seeping in of how embedded capitalism is within the church in particular too. All these things are becoming so conflated that
Yeah.
you can't, if you're within the system, you can't really tell
Yeah.
politics apart from faith
Yeah.
and apart from economics and all these things. And sure, faith should inform those things, but that does not mean that they should be one and the same,
Right.
or a universal mandate to control other people's lives.
Yeah.
And I think that the issue is, again, going back to what you were saying, is that you have this system that becomes about this product that it's producing
Mm.
to then get a offering or a tithe, which really is, it's become more like
It's a
a certain,
subscription.
here, we'll put on this show for you, we'll do this great, you'll be part of this great club and make sure that you're giving us your
I
money.
mean,
And it's,
dude, it's a Patreon. How different
yeah,
is it? Is it different? Great question.
yeah, I would say it's a Patreon with a shit ton of baggage and
Yeah.
manipulation and,
It's a
like,
Patreon with obligation.
yeah, and oftentimes using God and using even things like God will bless or curse your finances if you don't or do,
Right?
give, or like just so many other things, right? And um but again, what does it mean to participate in community, which is an absolutely wonderful thing that I think is part of the good that church aims at. People feeling like they're not able to show up
Yeah.
just completely as they are, whatever beliefs that they have,
Yeah.
whatever ideas that they have about God, grief they may be experiencing, to bring it back to that, right? Because how many times, and I've been there, and I remember back years and years ago to feeling so lonely, with
Mm.
lost within a sea of familiar faces, is how I often put it.
Yeah.
Because here I am around these people, and I'm not saying that I didn't have close friends and people that were meaningful, but here I am going through like really painful things. And I see all these people have these plastered on smiles on their face and all these different things. And I also remember hearing from that church that I mentioned earlier, from the pulpit multiple times, this pastor say, you need to remind your face that it's saved, basically. So as in to say that it's not spiritual to be sad.
See, I'm at the point now
And
where I would push back and say, be more direct what you're trying to say because you don't want me to misinterpret that.
yeah, what I
Oh my
really
gosh.
wish I would have said is fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway,
Mhm.
that's my 8 wing in stress coming out. I'm ready to go, being an Enneagram too. But my point of all that too is that what does it mean to belong to community? Does it mean that we need to look a certain way in order to have acceptance? I think a lot of people feel that way, especially the gaslighty thing about it all, and the confusing thing about it all is that you hear, these messages, oh, come as you are, you're welcome here, you belong here, this is family, right? All these things that
Yeah.
on the surface it appears super warm and inviting, and then the deeper in you get, it's like the cloak and dagger. And it's unfortunate because it does seem like the deeper in you get within the system, the more and more you're taken advantage of, right? Oh, serve more, give more, do more. And it's, you constantly feel like you're never enough.
I think about parentified children in situations where the parent, one or more of the parents is absent, unable to have a relationship with attunement for themselves. And so the children are relied upon in ways they shouldn't be. When we are in a church structure that is not being run healthfully, um, honestly, as a business, because it is. And so if you were to approach it from an honest perspective, there's a CEO, there's a board, there's people, there's leadership, right? There's places where you can create a structure to operate within. When you're relying on volunteerism, and that's a lot of what parentified kids are, right? Mom, I'll help, no problem. Because we want to see the family thrive. We don't like seeing mom in pain, and we know that there's responsibility, and sure, we can take care of it. Why wouldn't we? But then the guilt of pulling back and taking care of ourselves, or realizing, oh, we're empty now, because there is no space built for that to be reasonable. There's always a demand for more bodies, more people. One of the things I teach in my work is about People Fuel by John Townsend. It's a book of his that he talks about how we can function well, and what the human body, the brain, the mind, the heart is capable of, as far as like the number of people we can have in our lives. So that inner circle where it's you and maybe your spouse and maybe one other person, like very few in your close, I can maintain intimate connection with these people. There's that friend circle around that's 4 to 10 at most, where we can maintain friendship and connection. Everyone else is out in that acquaintanceship or stranger. And there's energy that can move those people between the levels. But if you move and try to pull everyone into that friend circle, you will drown in people and demands on your time. But you also aren't giving anything really to them. So when you try to flood that friend circle with people, everyone ends up as an acquaintance. And I think that's what really happened for me
Wow.
in church, was recognizing I've got my partner and I've got my one best friend. And oh my God, where did everyone else go? They're off together. They're thrilled. They're happy. I am isolated. I'm the only one planning things. How did this happen? Because I wasn't faithful in the relationships that I really wanted close. I was trying so hard to cultivate belonging by fitting in with everyone everywhere. And the culture of that church demands it, in the sense of, well, we need you to serve in church or in children's ministry, and we need you to serve on the worship team, and you need to be the greeter. We also need a prayer team, and we need a leader for this women's group. And how do you feel about outreach? And have you ever considered a missions trip? And what about youth group fundraisers for summer camp? There's so much programming for the best of intentions, but we fail to recognize that people need fuel, and they need it in small doses. And so we do small groups, right? But then when COVID hit, we stopped attending church because of immune disorders and fear. 100%. We had no idea. And we were rightfully so rightful to stay home. But we ended up leading a small group out of that right away. When they started it, I was like, yes, let's do that. That sounds great. With people we've known for years that were also in the same boat. I found out we kept our group going 2 years longer than we were supposed to, than anyone else did. Someone was like, "You're still doing that?" I'm like, "See, there's a failure to communicate. How are you not still doing that?" That was my question. What's going on in your small groups that you're not together and flourishing? I have plans with some of those people tomorrow night. Like, there's so much beauty in that willingness to get really small and say, "I see you. And you might be lovely, but it's okay that we're not close friends just because we're in this building." That's not how family is ever purported to function, right? Even as little kids, classmate, I remember my daughter's kindergarten teacher saying, these are all friends. And I was like, no, they're not. You have to be friendly. You have to be kind. You have to be respectful. But you don't have to call that kid that keeps calling you names friend. Why? Okay, friends, this behavior modification model that we have, and that's what we see in public school, that's what we see in church, does not serve anyone but the leadership at the top who benefits from our labor, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual labor. If we were to remove, now you're going to get me on a soapbox, but it's okay. If we were to remove the behavior modification and allow people to come as they are and let them be who they are, ask questions, become curious about it, open up and see if we can attune to who they are, where they are at, and maybe wonder why they are where they are. Do you know how many traumatic breaks we would have, or traumatic breaks that would resolve, that would begin to find healing, that we could finish that movement of, if you lacked attunement as a little kid because you didn't have someone to say, I see you, if we could say, I see you, and help them finish that motion of creating relationship and feeling okay in themselves. Now that's healing. And to me, that is
Yeah.
deeply spiritual.
Yes.
Okay. That's my soapbox.
No, I'm all for this. I'm eating this up, and I think I'm just absorbing it all because I absolutely resonate and agree. And the thought that comes to mind is, I think just people want permission to be themselves.
Yeah. Derek, that's
Yeah.
how I started grief work. When I first decided this has to go somewhere, I've written this book. We had a massive wildfire in our town. There was 2,500 homes destroyed within a few months of each other, these events happening. I just jumped on Instagram and I started a series called Permission Granted. And I thought, I have not felt the permission to grieve aloud. Like you said, if I have emotionality, if I'm not able to keep it together, or to spiritually bypass myself so that I can perform church this morning, whatever that
Right.
role is, then I'm not going to be okay. And that Permission Granted series became this expression of me, just short videos, just talking, rambling, but really saying, hey, you have permission to cry. Here's why. You have permission to feel. Here's why. You have permission to name names. Here's why. You have permission to make space for yourself. And there were weeks and weeks of those videos that helped me, number one, like process what I was going through, but also recognize and create resonance for people who needed to be heard. I said it many times, like, you don't need permission, but in case something tells you otherwise, here it is. I will write whatever slips you need. You can blame me. My mom always said that. I loved that about her. She would get me anytime I was like uncomfortable in a situation or kids were doing things I didn't want to be around. She would say, just blame your mother. Tell them she will kill you standing. Get on the phone, blame, I will be your bad guy. And I've said that to my own daughter because that is such a beautiful, like, you have permission to get what you need when you need it. Consequences be damned. If your friends don't want to be around you because you backed out and called your mom, okay, what does that tell us about what you actually need? Who can attune to you? We may not have had that language as kids, but now I do. So being able to recognize, wow, who am I attuning with? Who sees me? Who do I see in myself? And where does safety exist for me to be able to express myself in a way that I now experience that safety in an ongoing, very secure situation, and belonging can flourish. True belonging can exist. It's not just my personality that gets me in the door, right? For years, when my church and my community was first learning about the Enneagram, everyone's, oh, you're a 3. You're definitely a 3. Derek, the pain within me at this idea that I was a 3, because I'm like, I don't feel like excessive shame over things. Do I have shame? Yeah, everybody does. But like all of the studying about it, I'm like, I don't resonate with that. I took a test and it was like really high. They were all the same numbers, 3, 7, and 8. So the joke was, at least we know I'm an aggressive number and we'll just leave it at that. When I finally sat back and admitted, no, I'm looking up Enneagram 8 every night and like saying, maybe I'm not a 3, but I'm not angry. So how am I an 8? My closest friends, that little circle, looked at me and said, you're kidding, right? You're kidding. We've been waiting for you to find 8. We've been waiting for you to say it. And they would start to say things back to me. My own husband said, Mandy, since you were 18, you started saying, I'm 18 and I'll do what I want. Like, you just never stopped insisting your way was okay. And for me, like, recognizing it was personality, that led an entire group of people to say, you're a 3. You're always in front. You're always on top of the stage. You're always at the microphone. You're always leading. When there's a vacuum of leadership, an 8 will step in. And that too is personality. That's not the true self underneath there. But that recognition of, oh, they didn't see me. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't have.
Yeah. And I think to your point earlier is belonging really is, right, giving other people permission to be seen. And again, like I said earlier, people just want to feel safe to be themselves. So what does that look like? Even in the context of grief, like what does it look like for somebody to not be, to use a biblical analogy, just because we're on this kind of theme, not be like Job's friends, right?
Yeah.
But to be somebody who chooses to sit in the discomfort and recognize that there may not be an answer.
Yeah.
There may not be anything to do but grieve with.
Yeah.
Right. And I think about the word compassion, even
Mm-hmm.
it means to suffer with.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a real power in that word, because especially when we were conditioned and expected to just declare the truth and really stuff down all these things and put on that face.
Yeah.
It takes time to unlearn the spiritual bypassing. It takes time to foster those connections with safe people who are able to say, there's no rush here.
Yeah.
I'm here and I love you. I see you. I'm with you. I hurt with you. I feel what you feel.
Yeah.
And you don't have to put on a brave face for me. You can literally just be right here in this moment. And you have permission to exist however you are right now in this very moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Creating belonging for grievers is a complex situation with the context of faith. Because number one, Job's friends served a purpose. They taught us what we don't need, what isn't helpful. Spiritual bypassing is a very common experience within the grief world around the context of faith, because faith practices, especially Western Christianity, are addicted to certainty. We have answers, we have an outcome, we have a promise, we have hope in a future. So the tolerance for discomfort and the acknowledgement of uncertainty is a very painful thing to navigate when you are wrestling with a sudden loss, whether it's yours or not. So what I experienced in my own story, and this is in the book too, as I realized and I didn't have the language for it at the time, but like this lack of belonging is killing me and my faith isn't doing what it's supposed to, right? Bethel has healing rooms. We're not far from them where I live. I can't tell you how many people have gone down expecting miracles. People have gone down and received miracles. People have gone down and died anyway. People I know and love. So I've got all of this conflicting information. When I last saw my mom, I didn't lay hands on her and pray for her. And when she died and I got there 30 minutes too late to say goodbye the second time, I regretted that. I sat with that, recognizing my faith and the certainty I've been sold were not okay, because I didn't want to throw my faith away, but I didn't understand what it meant to have been handed such a formula and see it fail. And I'm not the first to experience that by any means. In my book, I expressed and walked through how I had this moment, and I don't remember now, honestly, if it was a dream or if it was a vision or just a thought that came to mind, but I had this very strong sensation of myself sitting on a picnic table and a whirlwind tornado going nuts around me. And I looked over and saw this embodiment of Jesus sitting on the table with me. And there was no talking. There was nothing but just both of our feet were sitting, all 4 of our feet were sitting on the bench, and we were sitting on the table just watching everything swirl. And there was a moment, a while of waiting, after waiting for quite a while, where I just felt the sensation of, you can reach out and grab something from this whirlwind if you want. Do you have anything you want to show me? It gave me so much permission to just strip away everything but Jesus and take the words of Jesus as the guiding path. And I know a lot of people say that's what they do. But I find a lot of conflict in what Jesus has to say and how the rest of scripture is interpreted and laid over things like grief. And so it led me really to say, to create belonging for myself and for others. I don't get to declare I'm a safe space. I know how to grieve and how to teach this stuff. That is not my role. My role is to show up open, regulated, available, and curious so that I can demonstrate compassion that allows someone else to attune to me and say, oh, they feel like a safe space. Our nervous systems know damn well what is safe and what is not. It's why we're so consistently dysregulated, because the world around us benefits from our dysregulation. We buy products out of fear and out of fear all the time, because we're not enough, because we need more, because we have too much acne, so we buy more products. We are too fat, so we buy more products. We are too skinny, so we buy more products. It benefits us. It benefits the machine to be dysregulated. So when I find an opportunity to create attunement for someone else and say, take everything in the whirlwind and press it aside, just be right here. I have had sessions where people have just come in the door and I've noticed, you just need to cry. I'm here. Cry for an hour. Cry for 2. I've got space. I don't have anyone after you. What do you need right now? And what's the strategy we can meet it together with? That type of openness didn't just come from education around grief and grieving myself, right? That's an intentional choice. I told you when you first asked, hey man, I'm fidgety. I can't sit still for anything, and I'm going to do my best. And your immediate response was, that's fine. Not, well, can you get it together for the camera? Do you think, is there something you can do? Maybe not caffeine after 3:00? Not at all. There's that willingness to say, okay, thank you for saying the thing. Thank you for being honest with what you might need. That willingness to hold space for someone comes from experiencing it yourself from someone else, right? Having it modeled well, but also being given permission to tell everything that causes you harm. It's okay for you to fuck right off. I don't need you here. If your interest is in minimizing how I feel, I have ADHD, so learning not to center myself, right? Learning not to tell stories just to relate and try to make some comfort. That's an active thing I have to do. And it's not as hard now, like training, that's what we do. But this idea of people who center themselves in your grief when they tell a story, oh, you had a miscarriage? I've had 7 miscarriages. That immediately takes that person and says, oops, that attunement is off. They're not attuning to, I need something. They're on a different wavelength. So when we say they're not on my wavelength or get on my level or we're on the different page, that's attunement. We're talking about, can they see me? Can they hear me? Do they want to know me? Or are they just looking for it for themselves? And I'm not the one right now. I don't have it available. Belonging is not a guarantee. It's a spectrum, just like anything else. And so when we have times with people that were like, God, that felt really good. And then we have times where like, where the hell were they? They were completely not with me. They're misattuned. Again, that's just a spectrum. That doesn't mean you have no belonging with them. That means there's time to reconnect. There's time to get curious. I wonder what happened. I wonder why. I wonder. And not only did I say something, did I upset them? In a direct way of, hey, where are you? Are you okay?
Yeah.
It's different.
Absolutely. And I think you've mentioned this word a couple, or actually a few times, and it's one of my favorite words, which is curiosity. And I know we've had a conversation centering around that. So for anybody who's listening to this, definitely go check out both conversations that we've had on Mandy's show on Restorative Grief. But curiosity definitely is something, not only in relationships, but just in general, even as a spiritual practice, to me is so special and meaningful, because there is something innate within us. I think that it goes back to our very early developmental years where we ask why. We're curious about life. We're curious about ourselves, how things are to work. But I think it's an inviting energy, right? It allows us to be open, to be vulnerable, to take in rather than to put up our defenses and to keep people away, or to keep even like our spirituality at a distance or whatever it may be. Curiosity allows our hearts and our minds and our bodies to be in a posture of openness, right? And I think that, again, what my question to you going off of that is, what does it look like to practice curiosity through grief
Mm-hmm.
from a personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
but also in operating in a community where you want to feel like people show genuine curiosity about you and what you're going through beyond just a, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm great. How are you? Oh, doing fantastic. Okay. Everybody, I think, on a fundamental level craves that genuine, authentic, raw, belly to belly, real connection. And I think that curiosity is so integral to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, I'm curious to get your thoughts on what does it look like, again, personally, to practice curiosity through one's own grief?
Mm-hmm.
And also, what does it look like to foster that in a communal sense?
It takes me back to when I worked in customer service and we were trained to say, I don't know, but let me find out, as opposed to no, or I don't know, period. I don't know, but let me find out. When someone would say, hey, how are you doing? I don't know, but let me find out. Tells my nervous system, hey, we're safe to get really inquisitive. We're safe to say, shit, everything is gray space right now. And that particular part, identifying that things are gray space, not black and white, things are on a spectrum, it's huge. It's crucial, frankly, if we're going to grieve with any type of, I don't want to say success, but intentionality with any kind of movement. Gray space is necessary. Black and white thinking is a cognitive distortion that we are obsessed with in the realm of Christianity because, again, goes back to certainty. Being
Mm-hmm.
able to recognize a healthy spirituality looks like the embrace of mystery. A healthy spirituality says there's no such thing as a box for God. There are a million names for God, and every one of them is
Mm-hmm.
someone else's understanding. Every biblical piece of writing you can read is just an interpretation. If
Yep.
that's true, then I wonder what else has not been uncovered. I wonder what else could be out there for me. And that's really the approach that I bring to my grief experience. And it happens, my mom died in 2016. It's
Mm.
2024, right? It's been 8 years, almost 9 now. And I still have moments where things will come up and I'll, wow, I wonder what that was, but not in a dismissive, move on from it way. I wonder what that was. What is hitting on in this moment? What brought that to mind? Is there a piece of my story that I don't remember? Is there a memory that needs some attention? Is there some kind
Mm.
of trauma that's in my body that has not been metabolized, that is asking to be metabolized? Memories and emotions, it's all energy and it's
Yeah.
all moving through us. And if we can get away from that fear of the new age, and that's such a cruel and, again, like self-centered reductionist way of describing someone's spirituality that we don't understand. If we can get away from the labeling and the judgment and the condemnation of what we think is wrong, we can authentically, and in a true authenticity, not in a this is my personality, deal with it away, but in a, oh, my personality got me this far, but the truth is I am someone afraid, I am someone loving, I am someone scared, I am vulnerable, and I want to walk out that vulnerability so that I can find what strength lies in the mystery of all these things I don't know. When I find someone that says I don't know what to do next, I'm like, fabulous, because I don't either, but I am here with you as we sort it out, because there's no pat answer. There's no formula. There is just being human and being gentle with each other through the completely bumpy ride that is life. And we
Mm.
get, whether you believe we get one shot or we get a million shots and they're all different, it really doesn't matter. The intention is, are you intentional? Are you here? Are you present? Are you leaning toward doing the right thing because it gets you the right thing? Or are you leaning toward doing the right thing because it is inherently right to do? Or even further than that, are you doing the right thing because others will benefit from it and it costs you something significant? Love costs you something significant, but it is worth it because we are connected. My flourishing depends on your flourishing.
Mm.
That willingness to be in the collective, that's decolonizing our faith. That's recognizing you, me, we. We have to be aligned and we have to be open to each other. And when I see the grief process of people who are realizing my faith is now a secondary loss in the face of this loss that I'm suffering, this grief event, because it's not showing up in the way I expected. Being able to gently say, you are still part of a community. There are still people for you. It will be hard to find some of those people, but even within that community, it's not the baby in the bathwater. It's recognizing there are others amongst you who are looking for that same type of attunement, who are looking for safety, and they just aren't in a community where they can signal, hey, I'm over here and I disagree with the way everything's being done, but I'm here for reasons, right? Yeah. Curiosity is crucial.
It is. And thank you for what you shared too. I think that it's what ultimately fosters the truest connections with anybody. If we practice, and I love what you said about, I don't know, and we'll figure it out together.
Yeah.
It's such a human thing to admit our powerlessness, right?
Yeah.
To admit that there are mysteries that we don't understand. There are things that we may or may not ever know.
Yeah.
And I think people want to have permission to admit those things to others and to feel like they're not alone at admitting that, right? And I loved what you said too, that spirituality really is mystery.
Mhm.
And I think that was so integral to my deconstruction process of
Yeah.
leaving behind a system that was the systematic theology and believing all these things and it's objective truth and the Bible's inerrant and all these things that are just like there's no question about it. And if you have any sort of dissonance in your body and your experience and doesn't match up and you're going through grief that doesn't align with everything that you've been taught and shown, well then something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Well, all that does is that creates a disconnect and a severing from oneself,
Yeah.
which is trauma. And for those of us who are navigating through religious trauma, number one, I see you. You're
Mm-hmm.
not alone in that. And number two, it's okay to take space and to look at those parts. For anybody who's familiar with internal family system, um, there's parts of us that call out for our attentions. There is our true self. There's also our wounded child.
Yeah.
There's maybe the angry adolescent. We have managers that want to protect us and keep
Yeah.
us safe, but there are aspects of us that have gone through events in life, and sometimes we just need to get a little curious about who may be in the driver's seat
Yeah. Yeah.
and who may be calling the shots. And I think that, again, getting curious about that after going through a time where we've had to shut off looking at ourselves, stuff it down, is so valuable. Because,
Yes.
again, a key to any spirituality, as I mentioned before, is a real and genuine relationship with oneself.
Yeah.
Um,
And liking who we are. And
yes.
liking the personality and recognizing, okay, that piece maybe needs to tone down. But liking who we're becoming and knowing that we are always in the process of becoming who we are and that piece of us is buried. Those parts are still with us and they have valuable things and they also deserve to experience safety so they stop trying to drive the bus. They're not in charge for good reason because we know more now and we can do a better job caring for ourselves now. And that statement, it requires a lot of ownership. It requires a lot of accountability to ourselves. We can't just blame the world and blame capitalism and blame Christianity and blame. We got to take responsibility for where we are, what we partnered with. It doesn't mean we blame ourselves. It doesn't mean we blame anyone. It means we stop trying to blame and instead get curious about what might be there and what might be possible despite what we've experienced or because of what we've experienced. But yeah.
Yeah. I remember going through an exercise with my therapist who is IFS trained. And I've done these exercises even on my own, but this one in particular jumped out to me because it was unique in that I recognized how the angry adolescent in me was really tired of calling the shots.
Yeah.
Was really angry. And I was like, why? And I won't forget that when I finally got through, because for a few minutes there, he was like, leave me alone. Like a typical teen. Right?
Yeah.
Just, leave me alone. But that part eventually showed me, I just want to have fun.
Yeah.
I just want to I want to have permission to be an adolescent, like a teenager.
Yeah.
And I think that there's part of us that gets stunted in our trauma, but also loses touch with the still very real important aspect of play and fun and, like you said, liking ourselves.
Yeah.
Because that is as much of a spiritual practice as anything else.
Yeah.
I think that so much of society and so much of our lives condition us to take life so seriously that we have like these crushing weights on our shoulders.
Yeah.
I mean, constantly feeling like I'm missing the mark as a parent, or constantly feeling like I'm missing the mark as a partner, or as an employee, or whatever. But the reality is that, and I saw this quote not long ago too, that I thought was so just, God, I'm probably not going to do it justice in recalling it, but the gist of it was, if being hard on yourself hasn't worked yet, then why do you keep doing it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Essentially, you don't need to be hard on yourself to create change. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah. You can't bully yourself into growth.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that all goes full circle to curiosity, right? If we're gentle and compassionate and kind, truly kind to our parts,
Yeah.
and create that trust and that safety internally, right? That's what leads to flourishing. And I think that's what leads to us having even the richest experience of life too, that we give all aspects of ourselves permission to show up, and to show up as they are in whatever given moment, because there's no mark to hit. There's no bar to achieve. And I think that's the freeing paradox also of this whole process of life, is that there's this tension between becoming and change and transformation, but also recognizing that there is a very real grace for right now, and an acceptance for all of who we are and whatever state we show up.
Yeah. That's well put. It's good.
Well, friend, I do really appreciate all your time. I want to give you the final little goodbye, if you will, to send us away. And just like you invited me back, I am inviting you back to make a part 2 of our time together, because I always enjoy our conversations. But yeah, if you were to leave people with any parting words, what would you like to share?
I'm going to share not my words, but someone else's words. And it's because the chaos and cacophony of noise right now in the world is loud. Even the thought of doing our own individual grief work is really scary. And I see a lot of people who I spend too much time online, and there's criticism both directions. Stop saying you don't have capacity to involve yourself in the crisis of the world, and stop criticizing people who are overwhelmed and don't have capacity or support to involve themselves. This is what it's right here in front of me. It's something I look at on a daily basis, because I don't want to be the person that backs away from trauma, nor do I want to be the one that wields it all, tries to show up as the hero for all of this. And I think that, again, that's a black and white approach. So what is the spectrum? What's the gray space in between? Where can we find space for ourselves? So the quote is this: do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. It's permission to do what you can where you are with what you have, and let that be enough. And I think that's really important when we are willing to face grief, that we give ourselves space to do it and space to step back.
So good. Yeah. Thank you. That was a great way to cap things off. Friends, I guess the final little bit to that is, for anybody who is online and would like to follow Mandy's work, definitely follow her on all of the social media at Mandy Capehart. I'll make sure to tag it in the little description below.
Okay.
Thank you again, Mandy. I'm excited for our next conversation because I'm holding you to it. I came on for 2. You at least have to come on for 2.
I must return. Okay. Labor for labor. I'm in. Thanks, Derek.
Awesome.
You're the best.
All right, my friends, be good to yourself. And again, thank you for watching.